All right, I was watching, let's see here. This is Projections, Optical Computing with Plasma, Stanford PhD Defense by Jesse Rodriguez, A. Rodriguez. Apparently, it was recorded on July 6th this year, which I know this is going to sound fucking stupid, but I talked about him making this presentation back when I lived with my parents' house back in Chandler around the 2015, maybe 2017 area, somewhere around there. And I had a similar idea for what it's worth about plasma. Now, I don't know what he's going to do to create his plasma, but the problem I had with plasma computing was the amount of energy I had to put into it that made it very unviable for me. The amount of electricity I had to use to make computations was something I didn't like, which is why I later on put out a chip design that I suppose I should just label it the CPU chip design instead of the magneto scene explanation and anything like that. But I want to talk about fast, colder ish plasma creation. Let's get that out of the way. The reason why I'm making this is because it's like, all right, so you take any given material, all right, you're going to knock it with light that it already expresses out anyways. Most things express a given type of light, typically in the IR or something. It's very weak. So we're going to reflect a little bit of that, but we're not going to reflect it the same way. Of course, we're putting it back. We're constructively interfering it on its way back in. Then we are going to have a small, forceful, aligned Z, meaning high current, but like we don't actually want it to be high current. So what we end up doing is yes, phaser, I get it, as he chews his chew toy over there. We're going to create a pulsing of multiple spike waves of volts. All right, so instead of having volts be insanely high, meaning like, for me it's a sine wave, volts are sine waves, but then it's like that's not what they are measured as for some stupid reason. They're measured as a separate to the peak and valley, and I'm like, that's not accurate to me, but okay, whatever. That's not really how that works, especially when electromagnetic fields are very different depending on how they spin, which is what we're going to be introducing in this. So, anyways, as we take a certain type of very fast moving spike waves that are low voltage but have high current, but then are going to be using very low moments of high current. And so low moment means it acts like it has a very large amount of amperage through it. So like while it has a high current temporarily, but they're low moment, meaning the volts are very low. When you pulse them, one's a little bit ahead, then the next one arrives at the same time, and the same time, and the same time, right? As light passes through with a given electromagnetic field current that we're running through it with that light, we have to then cause it to spin. So in this area, that area, and this area, which effectively means three different areas, left, top, right. So left, at the top, in the center, and at the right. All right, so think XY graph, right? Simple stuff. You can easily picture that in your head. It would take nothing for you to do that. Then you can see the center of the cross, left, right, and there's one at the top. So, if you can do that, pretty simple. You start one spike, you start the next spike, you start the next spike. These are the electromagnetic fields, which create and induce as they collapse a current that flows through with the light that's in the center. That you reflected, that initial light now is going to have the next light perpendicular to it run through. As it collapses, it creates a vortex-induced state that wants to travel along the same pathway. As it spins, it likes to align a large amount of electromagnetic fields in the Hall effect created by electron spins and the spin of that moving electron in its orbit. As a result of this, it happens to capture them and yank them all together. And when you pulse them the right way, it then starts all moving them as one. Like the Lorentz force, except, well, I suppose it is, for what it's worth. It's not really the Lorentz force because there's no electromagnetic going on, except for the one that's already been going, so it's parallel to it. But because it doesn't know that, and it's spinning, vortexing from out back towards center, it creates a Lorentz force, but then it heads back towards the same direction. In so doing, it gains a kinetic advantage in a moment where it likes to tunnel. As a result of it tunneling, it happens to want to collapse somewhere. If you put an electrode for those electrons around there, then those electrons don't come back. They have a higher probability of tunneling back into the electrode because it's a ground state instead of a positive state. It gets rid of the energy, and now you have plasma. A moving plasma state that the electrons are no longer attached to. And you can chunk it in little itty bitty tiny chunks. I designed it specifically for plasma chips. I'm not even kidding, because I was really interested in why it is that they didn't just run like a way faster reaction sort of drop state in a compressed tube, like they have carbon nanotubes of plasma that then becomes far more ordered as it moves around and becomes more forced to become more and more, I guess, in the center. Basically, it's dense, and then it's very, very ordered. And so they're all traveling in the same flow like a ring, right? But then it's like, well, if you introduce the right little tiny beats and pulses of acoustic electromagnetic variances, you create little tiny sound wave propagations that can calculate for you based upon the wave frequencies. Now, they're phononic calculators. But then I was like, well, I'll do you one better if I happen to eddy current it, slow it down, speed it up, and then have it excite itself. Temporarily creates, you guessed it, a qubit. Because it's in a technicality-wise, in its state, superposition. And by technicality, I mean it's in a superposition. It won't drop down until after it's been interacted with the sound wave that's around it. It's room temperature, that's why it's cold-ish. But that way I am able to calculate using plasma. But I was like, I don't need plasma. What am I doing all of this for plasma? I can use literal just regular helium atoms. They're baryonic. I can shove many of them in together. That means when they're temporarily in a state at which they're ordered enough and cold enough, they'll pop back into a fermionic state, and they were in a superpositional state where two existed as one. I was like, hey, now I have qubit systems that calculate at, you guessed it, room temperature, with high amounts of oscillation as they propagate through the tube. Because I can layer them and they can be at any given, practically speaking, because I only need them to exist and then be detected as they change, which is a field change, a sound pressure wave change, and a light expression change, right? Which I can capture. As a result of that, it's like, well, I can layer them 3D and then now make multiple, fast, high, accurate, 3 error correcting qubits that oscillate and then dump their information like any transistor will into the next area of transisting. I have clock cycles. Instead of needing, I have a qubit, blah, 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 I do bzzz, lots of qubits all the time, and now they have clock cycles that are really flow cycles, because it'll start here and then it'll go all the way over here, like this, called traffic. You guessed it, traffic. You remember traffic? Like you travel and then you slow down and it slowly propagates backwards. Yeah, simple stuff. That's exactly what sound computers do, but when they're in a rotating area that can also cross various areas that they need to pass information, you then have the ability to have multiple calculating transistors in one, with many qubits that only need to last for a few nanoseconds or something similar, which means I can get even smaller amounts of time to ultimately have something interact in that given time, and I just have to time it, just like they do currently with our silicon, which means I can go way higher than gigahertz. I can get into terahertz, or even, I said decillion was my max range, especially when I can start having tunnel effects happen in between. You know what tunneling means, because baryonic, it allows for it to move in a propagating way. If I entangle it with the right vibrations and light, then I'm able to tunnel one area over because it's baryonic at that moment. It can exist in multiple states. As a result, it maintains its information, and now it can go over here and do its calculations at an above area that it had no idea was over there in a below area, making faster computations occur with more qubit systems exist. And now you understand why I talk about it as being fast, colder-ish plasma creation. Because it was like, well, it's fast. It's certainly fast. There's no doubt about that. It's certainly colder-ish. Because it'll be pretty warm still. It'd be enough to heat up if water was around it to boiling, right? But compared to like several thousands of degrees, I only need to get up to 100 C, which isn't bad. That's why I initially created it. But eventually it was like, why? This seems like an excess waste of energy. Although I like plasma, I just don't need it for that. If I want to compute, I'd just use like helium or other baryonic molecules of air elements, right? So it's a whole thing after a while. I was just like, well, I just basically need to do this, then what the hell's the point? So, I don't know. But I did end up using it for something else entirely. So, when I use it specifically for acceleration and acoustic resonance properties for given thrust applications, then it made sense. Using electrons in a given type of ablating material, I was able to accelerate it to an insanely high fast velocity, as most of it for the electromagnetic fields and light that we use is about 98 to 99.87% captured to its given direction of travel. Which means, eureka, I just need solar panels and stuff. So, and then that eventually went to inertial acceleration engines, which were like, why do I even need this? That's a whole other thing. Baryonic state, less pressure. Fermionic state, more pressure. Accelerated that way, then it's not accelerating technicality-wise this way. Mass volume technicality-wise changed. Then it moved over here, and it moved over there less. Now it's continuing to move over that direction like I have never actually done anything. Oh my god. Meanwhile, they're like, that can't work. I can imagine all the things, and that's not a thing that I know. And I'm like, Yeah, okay. Well, apparently you couldn't imagine this. Should I write it out for you? I'm not really. It's just some guy in my comments. It's like I'm a mechanical engineer, and I'm like, okay, sure, dude. Like, people can lie whatever amount that they want, but like, you know, I guess you are. Well, here, I'll write it out for you so you can maybe write it into Chat GPT and then have it like suddenly have a diagram or some shit. So, like others have most likely been doing on my videos, which is fucking shit. Like, I can't do any of that. I don't have the money for ChatGPT. I can't do any of this. And most likely you'll get some fucking sucker with money to give you money to make this shit when it was my idea and you'll say it was your idea somehow. I hope you die. I do, painfully, before you're ever able to do any of that. That's the truth. But, whatever. Plasma's cool, though. I like plasma. The only problem with plasma is that it's just a different type of thing. It comes down to it's like if you look at plasma, the only reason why you have the amount of control over plasma that you do is because there's a effectively removal of its given shell, right? It's a shell that's moving around, right? And so once you remove that, then it's much easier to play around with it. Well, there are a lot of different ways to remove shells, and most of them I ended up getting to was an acoustic resonance through, well, not a resonance, but a field resonance, charge resonance, that would effectively like a slap round on a old style tank. It would peel off on the inside when this big round would hit and it just smush against it. It would then yank off on the other side, on the inside of the tank, a piece that would then try and, hit someone then on the inside, right? That's how they would call, that's how they would do it with slap rounds. That's why they call them slap rounds. But it's like, well, if you do the same thing, there's a resonance when it comes down to electrons. So if all you need to do is just shine some light and then ultimately allow for the right pulses to hit and the resonance frequency of any given shape of the material and the type of material property, then you can just yank out electrons and then have them tunnel, because it's a lot easier to make them tunnel that way, to electrodes that are nearby. Then you can force them to become plasma states with a lot less energy and a lot less heat introduced, except for that one little spot that you want it to do that with. So that way you get plasma that's colder-ish. So, simple stuff. But it's like most of the time people can't really understand what I'm saying. Mostly, more often than not, because they're pretty stupid. Not because they're smart and they think that they understand things. No, because they're stupid and they learned a few things and now they think they know everything. That's the issue I end up having with the vast majority of people. Like this guy, he has 3 majors, right? And it's like it takes him 3 majors to do this. I'm talking about like physics, quantum physics, engineering, nuclear physics, electro and chromodynamics, alongside of probability, mathematics, electromagnetic electrical engineering, photonic, which by the way is an entirely different thing. That's a baryonic field of study, which in nuclear physics, which is a bit rough because that's a subfield for, that's right, like styropyro, light-based physics. Like physics is a general term, and in no way implies that you know enough about this given type of physics that's within inside of that scope. Just like mechanical engineering, it's like, oh yeah, no, whoopee-doo, I'm really good with this type of gear, this type of idea that I work with on a day-to-day basis, right? but doesn't mean you know that, right? There's a bunch of mechanical engineering types, right? Bunch. There's material design mechanical engineering fields. That's you know what I mean? So it's just like, yeah, sure, you're smart with this one thing, but it doesn't mean in any way you're good with that. So it's like three of these, sure, that's great, but like that means he really only knows that he knows almost nothing compared to what all that is there. It's like I have to get into how many different types of fields of study just for that? Like what I talked about by having light ultimately interact with a field charge in a baryonic state for increasing tunnel propagation through a given low voltage, high current amp. Looks like a high amp, looks like that, is not, right? But that's why it is if you pulse boom, 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 boom in that way as it collapses, that's what creates the spin vortex. That's also why it moves and tunnels the way it does. See, like that excites it to a degree where it also happens to entangle it, but then goes to, actually, I can't really exist here because it says there's something there as I'm collapsing in a vortex because there's light there. So light interacts with the electromagnetic field, which interacts with the excitation of the electron orbit, which then creates a, yeah, no, I'm not, and then dunk, and it tunneled out. If there's an electrode there, then it grabs it because it's excited. I have a lot of electrons as I am an electron. I need a ground, right? So it's like, no, you're wrong. That doesn't work. I don't know anything about this, but I say that it does not. I'm like, why don't you talk to Steve? I'm sorry, Jesse, which Steve is a whole other thing. Is I know that your name's not Steve Jesse, but you're not ever probably gonna watch this. But like, Steve is something else to do with what the kids say now, because it's like a rendition of Ask Jeeves, something else. I forgot what the hell it is. It's got to stay up to date on all the things. But it's like, why is it moving together? And it's, you just wouldn't get it. You just, you wouldn't really maybe understand. Like everything's moving that direction. It's basically forcing it to move all of a sudden at once, and it keeps hitting it like an impact wrench. And then as it hits it like an impact wrench, it's trying to force it to spin. And as it's forcing it to spin, it's collapsing a field that attracts it like a Z current the other direction, even though there's a repulsive field the other way. And as it repulsively tries to go towards the other field, it then has to forcefully, with the light that's going through it, excite the given nucleus, which also repulsively makes the electron want to move away and get yanked out of its orbit. So effectively, it's no longer a Lorentz force, but you know what it does, though, because of the Lorentz force? It's the orbital field interacting, as the electron itself has its own spin, but is also going around in a field, right? And so, like, that's perpendicular to the field that's running through it that you're trying to align it with. So it does create a Lorentz force, but then it, like, then has to change its spin to align with the conservation of momentum. So its momentum is still going to keep going, but it cancels temporarily one of its fields as the spin will maintain itself. But then the other field, the orbit field, was now forcefully aligned with the electromagnetic. Then it pops itself out as the spin still has conservation of momentum. And so it yanks itself forward, and that's its tunnel moment, as it'll project forward a given moment in time where it then goes, I'm now here, and it collapses its state as to existing there now. That's why it tunnels. That's why it's like, I'm a really smart individual, right? And I'm like, cool beans. Yeah, but you need to go through a lot more before you're probably going to understand that. I understand that with no trouble. It literally is really simple for me to just look at that in my head. It takes nothing. But it's like, PhD defense, and I'm like, I can't even fucking finish community college because of my issues, man. Good fucking luck, man. I have no PhD or degree. There's nothing there. But it's like, I wouldn't trust you. Meanwhile, I'm like, oh, so why don't we just go look through all the physics textbooks, and it shows that that's exactly what's going on. I'm not just saying that it's going on. That's literally what they state is going on. I just learned because I brute forced it. I didn't look at the textbooks. I didn't need to. I can just imagine it. I'm that smart. That's all that is. Anyways, I guess I'll have to change the name. Right. I ended up stopping the recording there. I have to resume it. Like and subscribe or something. Again, it's nothing against anyone. It's just the vast majority of the time I have a hard time being able to explain this because I see it so simply and clearly. It makes every bit all the sense to me, and it doesn't at all have any real like need to be explained. It's like so obvious, you know? It's like super simple to know. But apparently for others it's not. And I keep forgetting that. Like I have a really hard time because it's like, oh, I need to do a presentation. And it's like, I don't wanna. I don't wanna have to explain all the little things. Like you should already know this. Like why is it so hard? Like it's so simple. Oh right, yeah. It's gonna be like 30 minutes of explanations, then 15 minutes of like getting into slightly deeper things, and then I'll have like 15 minutes to explain the actual thing that I'm doing, which bothers me because it's like I want it done. I want it done. I don't want to have to fucking keep doing it. You know what I mean? Yeah, I don't want to have to fucking do it. It's like you should already, and this is what it is, and that's simple. And then this Lorentz force is what creates the tunnel effect. Pretty simple. You should already know that, which means that you can then ground it to a basic, electrode of any sort. Huh? But it's pretty simple. It's just a type of resonant frequency that goes through it. That's all you have to do. It's not hard. You know about spike waves. You know about impact range height. This is simple stuff. Why is it so hard? Meanwhile, I can imagine very well, and I am very smart. And I'm like, I'm sure you are. This is what I wanted to say. Because, like, I'm sure you are. Like, you're smart in a different way. I can't do school like you. I can't even work a job like you. I don't have the abilities you have. You're the one with able minds and bodies. I don't. I don't have an able mind and body. I can't do basic fucking tasks. You know what I mean? Like, I can still be a great father. I can still be a fucking amazing husband, right? I can still do all the things of, like, this kind of creative stuff, but I can't do anything else. You know what I mean? Like, I can take care of things. I can kind of work on what's around me and, what I focus on or whatever. But even then, my focus is slight and ephemeral. You know what I mean? So it's like your ableism is showing. Why can't you just do this if you're so good? It's like, well, jealousy and inferiority complex aside, your ableism is showing. You know what I mean? But like, I just had to admit I was really smart after a while. It was like, well, yeah, no, that's obviously what that is. I've already known that for a long time. It took us like 3 years to come up with that. Are you in school? Well, yeah, no, I'm in school, but still. Okay, but that's that's not my fault, man. Like I don't know what to tell you. I just, did it in like a day and just thinking really hard about it. But what I really wanted to talk about was like and subscribe, hit that notification, please comment. I love to see your comments, truthfully. I do. I also want the engagement for what it's worth. Please watch all the way through. But like also, um yeah, I'm not really trying to shit on you. I just I just have such a hard time remembering, you know what I mean, that a lot of people just don't grasp things that I know and grasp very easily and see very easily in my own head like like it's nothing. And then I have like no real ability to like write anything down because I have such a hard time even like putting a recording application on my phone and going like I shall now hit the record button, or I shall now Google a single image and then that's all that you will see. Because they're like, no, you have a phone though, and I'm like, yeah, that doesn't mean anything. I'm like laying on my bed. I'm not gonna get up off my bed to record something. I'm not gonna plan like in any way like a set or like down the line, and then I present this to you or anything. Like, I'm never gonna do that. I don't want to do that. Nothing about that's fun. I don't like it to such a degree. I literally won't even do it. I barely even like doing this. So it's like I'm not gonna do that, but I suppose I'll do this. I need to try, but it's hard. Like, I can barely get myself out of bed most of the time. So like my depression and anxiety is really rough. Anyways, yeah, like and subscribe, No hate. Only pushing P. We're doing the pushing positivity here. It's, the humble under God. We're the humble under God, guys. I'm God, guys. You'll be humble underneath me. I shall make you feel very humble. Pushing P. Gotta do it.